Good morning. Good morning. I'm good. How are you feeling, sir? Good. See how it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, light up this one too. They work.
It works. Can y'all hear me out there? Is it okay? I just want to make sure it's working. Good. All right. Yesterday we were having trouble with the mic. It was glitchy. Well, good morning, everyone. This is our day 2 of our 2019 Public Safety Subcommittee hearings, and we have an exceptional team here on this committee. I'm really excited about our new additions. Make us older members all the better, and so we're happy to have you on board with us. If members of the committee, does everyone have their amended agenda track sheets? I knew Chairman Ballinger would have hers. Gentlemen, you probably were studying it so hard last night, and you got it up here. You really don't need it.
Didn't leave until hours.
Very good. I see. I like a man that wants to try to consume as much information as possible, right? Well, I want to welcome everyone again this morning. Today we're going to hear essentially from the third branch of government. We're excited. It's an honor to work with our colleagues in the judiciary. We have an exceptional amount of leadership within the judicial branch. And it's good to see individual members of the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court, the staying power that both bodies have had. There have been new members added, but those that have been there for a long period of time have lent their leadership skills, their talents, not only to making their judiciary more public, more transparent, and more active, but also working really well to bridge the divide that's supposed to be there constitutionally between the legislative branch, the executive branch, and, of course, the judicial branch. So we are honored to be here with you. We're happy to have you here. It's a privilege to see the members of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals and the Court of the Juvenile Court judges here this morning. With that, our first item on our agenda this morning is to hear from the Supreme Court. I do want to urge all members to focus on just the amended budget. So if you will just focus on that, there's not really much to talk about in that budget, which is good, but that's where we want to focus our attention. And then we'll have a few comments or questions from members of the committee. My goal is to try to have us out of here by 10 o'clock. With that, we have Chief Justice Melton. And I don't see Presiding Justice Nomnius. Sometimes he will attend, and Justice Boggs sometimes joins us. I see they're not here this morning. I did see them on the floor with you, Chief Justice, yesterday at the presentation. And then also we have Regina Jones. Thank you so much for being here this morning, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you indicated, we do have new justices on our court like you who are there to make us better, us older members. I have some degree of surprise of seeing myself as an older member of the court, but I think that's in fact what has happened. I will help get you out. As far as the amended budget for 2019, we have in our budget a request for $22,024 that was in the actual budget submission. The first amount of $18,000 was really to address Justice Ellington being added to our court. He qualified for the per diem, so that was another justice on our court that met the per diem requirements. So that amount was added to accommodate for those funds. And then the pass-through for the state trooper of $3,986 was added. So that adds up to the 22 that was submitted. What was not submitted that we've had discussions with Mr. Groom and with your staff is after September 1, we're added another justice. Justice Bethel was added to our court. He also qualifies for that per diem. And so he was appointed on September 4, 3 days after our budget submission was due. And so we do ask for an amount to be added to the budget of $17,322, which would make our total request for the amended budget $39,346.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. So are you telling us that Justice Ellington costs more to the state than Justice Bethel?
Just by a little bit. Just by a little. And that may change next year.
Is that age and is that rank or is that?
We'll revalue that next year.
Well, as much as I see Justice Ellington around these parts, I thought he resided somewhere close to downtown. That's right. He is a Soberton man. Thank you. Any other comments or is there questions from members of the committee? We have one. Mr. Williams, Representative, go ahead.
Mr. Chief Justice, always good to see you. Good
Yes,
to
sir.
have you here.
Thank you, sir.
Mine is just an off-the-record comment. I'm glad I lived long enough to see a Chief Justice dressed so spiffy and up to date. Thank you for this progressive justice.
I'm going to tell my wife you said that.
Sure, tell her.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for members of the committee? Mr. Chief Justice, I will say that, and this goes for Court of Appeals as well, and for members of the committee, the Department of Audits did an audit with the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court.
Yes, sir.
Those audits are published. I would ask that the members of the committee review those audits. Brian can send them a copy of them to you. I tell you this so that when we meet next about the big budget, I do want to spend some time going through the audits with you, hitting the high points. We want to hear from you as to concerns and issues that may have been raised in that audit process. It is intended to be an outside objective view, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the entire story is told. So I want to give both courts an opportunity to speak on those audits to the committee. I will certainly have questions about them myself to you. So that's just an advanced heads up on that, with that document being out there.
Yes, sir. We look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. We
Always a
appreciate
pleasure,
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Regina, good to see you. Yes, ma'am. Next on our agenda is the Court of Appeals. We have our Chief Judge, Stephen Dillard, the master of Twitter, social media, the judge that engages the most, I think, with the public dialogue and helping keep the presence of our third branch of government at the forefront of not only us as legislators, but I think the citizens of Georgia as a whole. If they're interested, they can always catch a good tweet or a good social comment from the Court of Appeals and from Chief Judge Dillard. Also joining him, we have Jan, nice to see you. Sarah is not here. Did I? No. Oh, okay, good. Yes, sorry. Right. Good. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I saw that we have our former colleague, Judge Christian Coomer is here. Stephen Caslin is here. Thank you, Stephen. And then Christina Smith. Nice to see you. And Jan, thank you for being here again today. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chief Judge, and let you present the amended budget. And this will be on page 1 of your track sheet.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to say, like Chief Justice Melton, I find it odd to be in the category of one of the elder judges in the appellate judiciary. And also just want to say your very kind comments about transparency. I want to thank this body in particular. A few years ago, we asked you to fund live streaming. You know, we were going to be 3 or 4 years out from moving into the new building. I wanted to give you feedback. I hear from lawyers and even citizens who appreciate the ability in a big state like Georgia to be able to see our hearings without having to drive to Atlanta. And I just want to thank y'all for that. I think it's meant a lot, and I think we are better as a state because we live stream not only our oral arguments, but the Supreme Court does as well. And they were really a leader in that. So I just wanted to thank y'all for that. Moving on, I'll try to be as brief as possible. If you look at the tracking sheet 5.1 One, this is increasing the funds for personal services. This is covering, much like Chief Justice Melton went over, these per diems. We're actually asking for less than we traded some players to the Supreme Court, and so we actually have less in our supplemental. That's dropped from 58,340 to 39,984. So we were pleased to ask for less than we need there. And then as for the 5.1.2, this is a request for $11,148. This is, I guess, a pass-through to GBA, increasing some of the security measures around the building. If you've been in our building recently, you've seen some of them on the elevators, and I guess some of the new, Jan, where they put them near every door.
Card key access.
Yeah, the card key access. So, and that's, I think, rather self-explanatory. The third one, and I don't want to belabor the point here, and I know I talked with you, Mr. Chairman, when we met earlier this year. Last year, we asked for another central staff attorney position. As many of you know, our court expanded beginning in 2016 from 12 to 15 judges. When you do that, each judge gets 3 staff attorneys. So we had a total of 9 new staff attorneys, and we are, first of all, very grateful to have that help. It is enabled the court to be even more efficient than we've been in the past. And it's not really a downside, but one of the effects of that is you have more employees that have to leave for whatever reason, medical leave, family situations. And when that happens, we have to dip into our central staff. One of the things I expressed concern to you, Mr. Chairman, last year was that we were concerned that the amount of staff attorneys that we had were not sufficient to cover, that we would get to a crucial point in having those folks floating in other chambers for staff attorneys who are out sick. And at a certain point, it becomes a crunch where our central staff is cutting into its core functions. Just as a way of explaining, our central staff reviews all jurisdiction in every case. They handle interlocutory and discretionary applications. And for those who are attorneys, I know you know, Mr. Chairman, we have a mandatory 30 and 45-day deadlines to turn those around and give a decision to the public, which I think is a good thing, that people find out quickly whether that those discretionary and interlocutory applications are going to be granted. So we have had for about the last year, we're maxed out. We have that core group that handles that. We have another group that handles what we call opinion writing. So when times are good and nobody's out, we have these central staff attorneys helping chambers with more difficult cases, with easier cases. They take the load off of the chambers that allow the chambers attorneys to really focus on the more complex cases. When times are tough and a lot of people are out, they are crucial to filling in the gap labor-wise for those chambers. So when we expanded the court and we agreed with the Supreme Court in a historic endeavor that you guys once again led the way by passing that legislation, when we shifted jurisdiction down to the Court of Appeals in several categories of cases, that increased our applications. And Mr. Chairman, we just finished some number crunching, and I'll just give this to you briefly. In 2015, we had 802 total applications. From 2016 to 2017, we received 43 more than the previous year. We went from 802 to 845. From 2017 to 2018, we received 46 more. So now we're up to 891. So that's 89 more applications that we're processing just from 16 to 18. So without getting into some nerdy stuff here, the bottom line is we need, one of the things that we discussed when we agreed to the jurisdictional shift was that we would need help. And you guys have been great. You've already provided us with 3 central staff attorneys, which helped restore where we were previously prior to the recession cut. So we're kind of restored, and maybe even one more, but now we're having to deal with the new add-ons from expanding the court and expanding our jurisdiction. So I know this is an unusual request to come to you in a supplemental budget and ask you to fund a position. I'm doing it because for all of last year, we had almost for the entirety of the year. I don't want to say for the entire year, Chris. I don't want to misspeak, but for the vast majority of the year, every one of our attorneys was in chambers filling in for somebody who was sick or who was out for whatever reason. And so the reason I would like it, if you would consider approving it in the supplemental, is that we don't want to wait until July. We need help is basically the gist of it. We need this position. And so anyway, I won't belabor the point, but that's what we're asking for in that last and final for the supplemental budget in the amount of, is it $82,132, Jan? Is that correct? So I appreciate you indulging me and letting me, but I would be happy to share with any of you those statistics, and also if any of you want to come and visit our central staff and talk with some of our folks, and I'd be happy to, arrange for that.
I think that would be helpful on the latter request to go and visit. So I'll ask Brian to try to set up a time,
Okay.
Hopefully sometime next week quickly, that we can come over and spend an hour. It'd be good if we could try to walk through the central staff facilities of the Court of Appeals, and then if we can go upstairs and or around the corner and also check and see the clerk's office and the Supreme Court. I think it's important that the committee see the facilities that are there now and see how packed in and cramped they are. You'll see some of the attorneys are working in chambers that's supposed to be a lobby reception area, and you'll see them packed into the desk in those areas. And I think it's helpful to know that, so that when you see the transition into the new building, you'll understand the need for the building. So I hope we can try to arrange that for a quick run through.
I'd love for y'all to do that, and I think it will also, and once again, I want to stress how appreciative both the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals, how appreciative we are for the leadership of this body for many years, but especially the past few years. Y'all are helping revolutionize how the appellate courts are going to operate, for the next 100 years. And so we're appreciative of that. I think it would be good to see. Then when we have y'all come over, when we open the new building, I think you'll really be able to see how different and how much more collaborative that environment is, and you don't have everyone spread out. And so we'd love to have y'all over there and let you see what our central staff folks and everyone else is doing. We'll give you the grand tour. It doesn't have to just be central staff.
Well, I don't know we'll have time for a grand tour, but we'll need to do a fairly. Okay, well now Representative Williams might want the grand tour. If we can budget an hour and 15 minutes, I think that would be.
I'm a frustrated tour guide,
reasonable.
so I'm happy to have you.
Now, if you go with Chief Judge Dillard, he will take you on every part of the building, every nook, cranny, corner, closet. I mean, you will see it all. You'll find out where members have been in the basement areas, the old morgue. I'm sure there's some there, but he didn't show me any of those. But I would urge you to go see it. I think it's worth the time. I do have a few questions from members. Who's 24? Chairman Werkheiser.
Thank you. And I did take advantage of a private tour with the judge last year, and I appreciate the time that you gave me. But just for the new members, one of the things that really intrigued me is when, not just because we're one of the more populated states, but when you look at per capita, per cases, the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals, when you compare us to other states, their numbers, I mean, there is like, it's, Georgia's here and second, third, and fourth are way down here. So it's impressive the volume of work that y'all do, and I thank you for that.
That's a very good point. So you'll hear this over again, and I think that this will be a part of the full budget presentation. But it goes to the point that the Chief Judge is making, and that is that I think it was the Massachusetts Supreme Court, if I remember correctly. So the Supreme Court of the state of Massachusetts did its own study to look nationwide at all Supreme Courts and determine how active they are in terms of their oral arguments and in their writings. As a result, Georgia stood out as the top most active court in the United States in terms of production of decisions. And I mean, the discrepancy or the difference between The next closest was in the hundreds in terms of the amount of opinions that are written, and then the transparency through oral argument is exceptional. All that's to say, and then there's another study. I think it was by the University of Chicago, maybe.
I think that's right.
That did a backup to two separate studies, analyzing these very issues, and all that is to say this: that when you have a court that is actively deciding cases, it is helpful to your citizens. So the constituents, your constituents in your district, if they've got a case and it doesn't go the way they think it should have gone at trial, they need to appeal it to the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. The fact that your citizens get a decision in a timely manner and get that decision in writing is, I can't tell you how important that is to the constituents that are in litigation. They're expending enormous resources, time, there's emotional angst, anxieties that are all a part of the litigation process. But to have that ultimate decision rendered in your case quickly and not dragging out forever, or not denied and you don't feel like you got the opportunity to have a hearing by a reviewing court, I mean, that can be very demoralizing to your constituents and to those people in litigation. So all the numbers are great, but I wanted to make sure that you understand what we're talking about. We're talking about people that are in a difficult position. They need a decision, and that's what our judiciary is there for, is to make that decision.
And I know you know this, Mr. Chairman. I think we're all proud that Georgia has been the best state to do business now for how many years. And I know you all know this. When a business looks at a state to determine whether or not they want to come here, one of the things they're going to look at is our civil and criminal justice systems and the way we process trials and appeals. And so I think to the chairman's point, that's we think it's important to not only do quality work, but to do it in a timely and an efficient manner. And we've been reforming our court in many ways to make us even more efficient. So we have that time to spend on these very complex civil cases and complex criminal cases as well.
And then we get complex orders and
That's right.
opinions.
That's right. We try to keep them in plain English.
All right, I have a question. Is that Vice Chairman Gravely, you have a question?
Judge, thank you so much. I would echo the chairman's sentiments. Ms. Jan, thank you so much. And for our other judges and justices that are here this morning, we would like to recognize our former whip, Judge Coomer, and Judge Dillard, if you would. We believe he is in the posture to have his caseload increased to help with that, to be, that effectiveness, that efficiency. Load him up, Judge. We would appreciate
Listen,
that.
we are thrilled to have Judge Coomer. He has already provided us with a lot of insight, and I know he's proud of his service with the General Assembly, and we're thrilled to have him.
Well, Judge Coomer and I shared a suite together, and there's some funny stories that go with that. So I'll share those at another
I would
time.
love to hear those. Absolutely.
And yeah.
Stories go both ways.
Hey, but I'm not shy about them at all. I did want to. So to your request, though, Judge, I'll say this: we have historically not given positions. Chief Judge Doyle, former Chief Judge Doyle, is in back, and we had a nice exchange one time. She was advocating as hard as I've seen anybody advocate before for that position. And I told her the same thing that I'm telling you, is that in the amended, we just don't add positions. If you have the funding within your budget, we may consider allowing you to use existing funds to put that position in place, knowing that it'll be there for the current budget. But to add a new budget line item and add that money in, that has just not been historically what we've done. And
I understand. I knew
I
I
would
was
certainly
climbing
hate to have the
uphill.
wrath of Ms. Doyle in the back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all that's to say is that you have every right to ask, and part of this process, whether it's this budget or it's the next, is to have a discussion about the needs. And sometimes those needs can be addressed immediately. Sometimes they cannot be. So I just want to have that candid statement to you. You've presented a budget to us, and we want to have a
I
open
appreciate
dialogue.
that, and I appreciate the ability to have a conversation about maybe different ways. If we knew that it was, that position was going to be granted in the 20 budget, that would be funded then maybe there is a way that we could look to existing funds to. So I appreciate that at least possibility to have that discussion.
Now, let me ask you about the 20 budget. I know I said we were going to stay on the amended, but I do want to ask about, there's some one-time funds here that Brian and I were looking at, and it's interesting to me. I wanted to ask if it would be possible, or what the court's thought would be on moving the one-time funds for technology expenses. This would be related to the new judicial building, but moving those funds up into your amended. The other question I had was on your closed caption viewing.
Yes.
What if we moved that up that's $46,200, and move that into the amended budget? There was another the technology expense that was $70,000. There was also
I have a good answer for you, Mr. Chairman, on the
let's-
70,000. We don't need it anymore.
You don't? Okay.
I figured you'd like that answer.
Oh, well, we certainly do.
Jan just pointed to me that I guess based on the most recent information.
That it's gonna be included in the building funds, so
Okay.
that we
If you
won't
turn the
need
mic
it.
over to Jan so I can hear
I'm
her
sorry.
hear her
We
lovely
have been
voice.
told by GBA that it will be included in the building funds.
Okay.
So we will not need it supplemental, for the 2020 budget.
I think we were just waiting on confirmation on that before we confirmed that. Now, were you saying, Mr. Chairman, to move the closed captioning to the supplemental?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't.
Anything else that you might be open to shifting to the supplemental?
If you give me just a second, is there anything else that you see, Jan, that we can shift over? What about the cyber, or is that ongoing? Yeah.
The cyber is just,
Ongoing.
it's really a zero. We just don't want them to remove it.
Okay, gotcha.
Because it's a house cleaning item.
One-time funds.
We had gotten one-time funds, but we need them ongoing, so you can't do that in a supplemental.
I think that's it, Mr. Chairman, that we
Okay.
could, but we would absolutely be amenable to moving over the closed captioning. Obviously, we think that's important for all Georgians to be able to view and.
Yeah, I didn't see any in the Supreme Courts that were one-time funds. I don't believe I saw any of that. But Regina, if there is anything, let me know. Okay, that I just wanted to ask. So
Sure. No, thank you.
Closed caption seemed like it would be useful to the public initially, immediately. So, okay, with any other questions from members, I don't see any. Thank you very much for your time,
Thank
Chief
you, Mr.
Judge.
Chairman.
Thank you,
Thank
Jan,
all
for
of
being
you.
here. Appreciate it. Next on our agenda is the Council for Juvenile Court Judges. Executive Director Eric John is here, and Kirsten Wallace is the Budget Director, and we're both happy to have you both here today. And let's find it. It'll be
Thank
on
you, Mr.
page 3 of your track sheet, which is section 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start off today by saying that when we were talking about the state of Georgia, this is my 31st year in state government. In January, my father gave 23 years at the Medical College of Georgia. So between my father and myself, we've given 50 years of service to the state, and I would not do it any differently. And I just echo what you have been talking about. Our court system and working with the juvenile court judges has been a great experience for me. One of my first mentors when I went to the Council of Juvenile Court Judges was your father, Judge Buddy Welch, who taught me a lot, and I learned a lot from him, and I really appreciated him. So, and I'll turn over the budgeting to Kirsten.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Wallace. I'm the budget director with the Council of Juvenile Court Judges. And Mr. Chairman, basically the item that we're asking for in the amended is just a housekeeping item. It's for a shortage in the judicial retirement system, which was caused by the House Bill 5 that passed, which increased the grants to counties from $85,000 to $100,000, which your committee passed. So, and that amount is $90,034.
I know the Representative Ballinger, Chairman Ballinger, worked hard on that with Judge Caldwell before. So this is just an adjustment to account for that $15,000 increase I think it was in the grants.
That's correct. The salaries went up for the juvenile court judges. It took a year for it to shake out because of, the different ranges that were increased for the juvenile court judges.
Chairman Ballinger, you have a question?
I just had a quick question. I know Agici, I think that's
Right,
the
I was about
judicial
to say
circuit,
that,
has
yeah.
finally seen the light,
Right.
and is having implementing a juvenile court there. Have they been receiving the grant, and will they be receiving the grant? What is
They,
the status of that?
Agici has had the Superior Court judges doing the juvenile courts since 2000 when the state funding,
Okay.
for various reasons, courtroom space, personnel. They finally decided to appoint 2 part-time judges. They have not been receiving the funding because it goes to juvenile court judges, but they will be receiving that funding. I've talked to their Superior Court judge, Gates Pete, who's the chief judge, and some others, and so they will be asking that. They want to start that, I believe, in July.
Okay.
1st.
All right. I just wanted to, because I knew if they were, kind of, I heard about it like a month or 2 ago. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't neglecting them in the amended. Thank you.
And I'd like to take the opportunity again to say how happy our judges are, how appreciative they are that you increased the funding from 85 to 100,000. It really affected the rural areas more because we had a lot of judges who were just getting paid 85. We had judges doing 4 or 5 counties on $85,000. The counties weren't even pitching in, which I just don't understand that because you're giving them money without any strings attached, and they can't even do that. So we're happy to report that's happened. A lot of them have come on board to 100,000. We've actually had 1 or 2 circuits that went from part-time judges to a full-time judge, which I think is good because it gives you a person to concentrate. Nothing against our part-time judges, they're great, but they're having a law practice, or in some cases we've got judges who are other types of judges that are also juvenile court judges. So a full-time juvenile court judge is very important, and I just recently saw where one of our judges, Joe Diaz from Gwinnett, has been involved with the Mexican consulate. I know y'all heard that Tom Rollins had reached an agreement with the Mexican consulate to deal with children, immigrant children, and so Joe Diaz, one of the juvenile court judges there, full-time, had a lot to do in those meetings and setting that up, and that's what a juvenile court judge does, is not only judge, but also does a lot of collaboration and going and reaching out to the community. I don't think, and you'll know this, I don't think you get as close to the community with any other judge as you do with a juvenile court judge. And I may be biased, but you see the juvenile court judges reaching out to the public for all kinds of things, for help with their children, and I just don't think you get any closer to the community than with a juvenile court judge.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We question the council. Do you ever consider any kind of criteria or rules as it applies to whether or not you can have a part-time judge, juvenile, especially with the growth we're experiencing even in other parts of Georgia? What do you say there, and what's your pay for a part-time juvenile court judge?
I'll answer one thing. I'll let her. We don't have criteria because obviously, as y'all know, it is a local decision. We do, though, assist a lot of the judges, a lot of the Superior Court judges, when they're considering part-time to full-time. We give them the benefits of, what a full-time judge does, how much they get paid, stuff like that, what their budget is compared to a part-time judge. So we're helpful in that regard. I'm helpful with, for example, Agici. I talked to Judge Pete, Gates Pete, the chief judge, and he said, Eric, what do you think? We've got so many counties. We're thinking about 2 part-time judges. I said, that's your decision, but you got to keep in mind is with one judge in that many counties, you might not be able to get around. Like, for example, Phil Spivey in the Okmulgee circuit, he has like 9 counties, and he's just one judge. I don't know how he does it. He goes from Milledgeville almost all the way to Athens. So we try to help in that regard, but it's a local decision, has so much at play, budgeting, courtroom staff, courtroom space, and so we just help them as much as we can. Now, Kirsten can talk about numbers, specific numbers.
It actually breaks it down in the code section that the part-time judges usually, and the counties and circuits follow along, it's usually $20,000 per day that they work. So if a juvenile court judge works 3 days, it would be $60,000, all the way up to the $100,000 per week.
Per day, per
Excuse
week.
me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, 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 no. I'm
I
sorry.
was going to try to take the bar.
Yes. Yes. We have an influx of
No, but that kind of money.
I apologize. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
I have a follow-up on that. And I realize that it is a local situation, but I've spent my whole life watching local things change. It's not locked. I remember the old Court of Ordinary became probate judges, and more the requirements now for those positions. And I listened to the governor. Well, I've listened to him 4 times now, and he said it each time. A lot of emphasis on gang activity. And my hat's off to the 9-county person. That's about like the old itinerant preacher. You preach at 4 churches and you pastor none. So that's why I was wondering.
Representative Bruce.
Eric, how long have I known you, man?
Probably since you came to the legislature, and we were in Rotary together too.
Yeah.
Representative Bruce popped in one time in our Rotary Club after he'd left, and somebody looked and said, "Roger Bruce, I thought you had died." And he goes,
Yeah, a lot of people did back in 2004. But unfortunately for me, I didn't. Unfortunately for others, I survived it. But I was asked by one of my juvenile court judges to ask questions to you guys when you got here. And I apologize, but I told you I couldn't get here till 9:30. There were 2 things that they asked me to ask you about. One was dealing with women. The way I think she explained it to me was that currently, if a pregnant woman that happens to be on drugs with no children at home cannot get assistance through the court because there's something in the law that says you have to have children at home already. And so I didn't know if you guys were dealing with that at all, funding for it, but she is really trying to help women that are pregnant on drugs, trying to get off drugs so that their baby is not harmed. That was one question. The other question is about this 12-point system in the juvenile courts where these kids can accumulate, until they accumulate a certain number of points, they just basically get released back into the custody of the parents, even though the parents can't control the kids. And people are being killed and hurt and all kinds of stuff. And I don't know if there's a funding issue for that, because I was told that part of the policy was based on not having space or places to put these kids when you do this, but it's an issue. And if funding is a problem, then I think that we need to be talking about that and seeing what we need to be doing, because that's putting those kids at risk, but it's also putting the public at risk if the parents can't control those kids.
The first question I'd answer is the court system's not necessarily sort of the lead in that, but I know DFACS and a lot of those groups work with that. I know there's some laws that actually require, in this case you said there are no children, but there's actually a law that says when a woman tests positive for drugs, they require a 6-month removal of the children. In this case, you're talking about a child being born possibly drug affected. So I know that DFACS and the Department of Human Services are working with that to help pregnant women with those situations and get them into counseling and that kind of thing.
Right. She's saying that she wants to be able to do it from the bench.
From the bench.
Where somebody comes before her, they've been accused of a crime, and they're pregnant, and they're, they don't want to have a bad baby in jail, I guess, or a sick baby in jail. But she's looking for that. And I don't know if you can answer that question now, but she told me to ask it.
You're talking about Judge Walker?
Yeah, I am.
Initiative. Yeah, I've been trying to kind of help her with that, and I've actually been talking to DFACS about hammering through that legislation that she's thinking about and her.
Well, actually, she asked me to carry it
Okay,
for her, so
okay.
the
So
bill
good.
is actually drawn up, and I'll be
Okay.
glad when we get out of here to give it to you.
Because I know she's talked to us about it, and she's almost, it's almost like a first initiative on this
It
issue.
is.
She might end up setting a precedence for how these cases will be handled in the
Okay.
future, but I don't know much about it because she didn't really talk to us about it at the council meeting, but I know it has started to percolate because Defects has talked to me about it.
Okay, don't leave, I'll give you the.
All
I'll
right.
give
The
you-
other question was, you're talking about the points is just determining the number. Each of the kids comes in with a number of points, and then they decide whether to detain the child or not detain it. And there was a big initiative on that. It's called the DAI, Detention Assessment Instrument. A lot of that arose out of the governor's criminal justice reform, and there has been a major effort to hammer that down with the point system. There's been a lot of discussions from the district attorneys, through the defense attorneys, through the judges, about how you come up with that scoring system. So we're trying to come up with a uniform system. So we're gonna have DAI, we're gonna have PDAI, and PDRAs, which are all assessments to make sure, because a lot of times when juvenile justice was seeing a child with one kind of scoring system, the judges were actually seeing it with a totally different type of scoring system. So for a while there, I think we were looking at detention based on space and beds, but now we're really working hard to make that uniform throughout the whole state, so we're using the same scores and we don't get a lot of different ranges in scores.
As you're doing that, Eric, would you please also consider how best to determine whether or not a child is of such danger to the public in a courtroom as the child should be restrained?
Yeah.
There are courts in the state of Georgia, juvenile courts in the state of Georgia, where the children are restrained almost as a routine aspect of presentation to the court. And there are courts in the state that is not done, only in the most rare circumstances. And I think that there needs to be some discussion. I know there has been some discussion, but I'm asking you during this session to have considerable more discussion with prosecuting attorneys, PDs, as well as the sheriffs and your judges, to talk a little bit more about this issue and see what standards and rankings can be utilized. If it's not done internally, then it may be done legislatively. So while you're doing those other assessments, please take a look at that issue as well.
We're actually, we've actually jumped the gun on that, and we actually passed a rule, and it's been submitted to the Supreme
I've read the rule, and it's woefully inadequate.
Okay, all right. So what we were trying to do was create a rule that would create sort of a protocol development between the sheriffs and the judges. And I know there are some people saying that they wanted more direction in the rule, but we also didn't want to step on the feet of the sheriffs who actually control security. So I've had already a discussion with Terry Norris from the sheriffs to try to put something together that'll be more uniform through the state. Because you're right, we're hearing different things. Judges,
Yes.
Some judges have protocols, some have no protocols.
Right.
Judge Michael Key from Troup County has 4 orders that are very well done. They address every situation, how the kid is supposed to be handled. That's probably one of our betters. Down in South Georgia, Judge Brinson has a 1-page protocol that he developed with all his sheriffs and got them to agree on it. So, absolutely.
Good. Please follow up on that. I'll be looking and listening throughout the session on that. Okay. Chairman Bowser.
I just wanted to mention Representative Bruce, Chairman Welch and I both sit on the Special Advisory Group for Juvenile Justice and JDAI. The juvenile detention is one of the things that we look at. So I'll be more than happy to talk with you offline. I don't think this is probably the right forum for it, and it's probably just a discussion that we need to have offline. But I'll be more than happy to chat with you about that.
One last thing, Kirsten, the language that's in our track sheet, that in the language is important. So as you read these track sheets, the numbers are, everything on the track sheet is important, and the language that's used to describe what the funds are for is important. the language here, could you speak to the language? Because I believe there's a language change that needs to be made.
Yes, that's correct. The language that's in the governor's document was actually the language that was supposed to be used for 2020, the fiscal year 2020 budget request. For some reason, it was pulled up to the fiscal 20 amended 19 budget request. The proper language is to cover actually, which I've given all of this to Brian. Increase funds to cover a shortage of the employer share of the judicial retirement system. So the language that you're looking at in your document is incorrect.
Same functional, that's what the money's going to take care of, is that adjustment in grant pay.
Correct.
But this language is not accurate that you have in the track sheet. So Brian will be revising that language, and we want to make sure you're aware of that. Kirsten, thank you. Any other questions for our council and juvenile court judges? If not, appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. One thing we'll be doing is that I did want to take a moment to point out that this subcommittee, out of any of the subcommittees on appropriations, has met and reviewed the proposals of the amended 2019 budget first, and we are the first subcommittee to complete our work in terms of public hearings. So now we will work on making some adjustments to a document, and then we will, at some point in time, we will reconvene to present that overall presentation to the full committee. So I wanted to tell you thank you. We're ahead of the game, and we're doing the work that needs to be done. So we'll do our background work for you and get you a final document for you to review. Thank you so much. We'll stand adjourned.